The title for the talk is The Life of an Order Member. And just to start off, just to kick off, I just want to introduce a bit of, my story really. I came along, I moved to London in 2008. My partner's English, and I was 27 or so. I moved to London and found like living in London pretty tricky and strange coming from Australia. Especially I came just as the winter was about to start, so I hadn't really ever experienced anything like that, the cold and the darkness and stuff for such long periods. And so it was a bit of a culture shock on a number of different fronts. But it was also a point in my life where, going away from friends and family, I could pretty much, I felt like I could pretty much do whatever I wanted to do. I wasn't really tied down to any particular group norms or anything. I was pretty free. I mean, apart from my relationship with Michelle, but that didn't feel to be something holding me back at all. Probably the opposite. Anyway, I thought I want to learn to meditate. And I went along to a Buddhist center and I learned to meditate. And very soon after that, I booked on a retreat. It was actually a retreat I was looking for first of all. And I went on a retreat, and the retreat, it was at Vidrasana Retreat Center, which is the retreat center for the London center. And I met Maitreya Bandit, who Aryajit just mentioned. He was leading the retreat. And I think the thing that I took away from that retreat was that I was a Buddhist. I went home and told anyone who would listen to me I was a Buddhist. And, I was that's what I was, and I felt at home. I think I just felt quite at home in those conditions. But it was a very positive atmosphere and a very friendly and communal sort of situation, which I really don't know. That's just a dishwasher kicking off. So I sort of got involved, and I've stayed involved ever since. Really, I very quickly moved into a community at the London Buddhist Centre. Within about 6 weeks, I was living in a community, and I met lots of Buddhists. And the thing about the London Buddhist Centre is it's very easy to get involved and support and do classes and just meet lots of people. And that suited me perfectly. I thought it was fantastic. And I just wanted to be as involved with what I found as much as I possibly could. And I felt that pretty early on. But within the space of about a year, I actually asked to get ordained as well. And I might have to say a little bit about what that means. At the time, I didn't really know what it meant, but I knew order members, and I was living with order members, and I could see the way they were living, and there was nothing in that troubled me. I felt I just wanted to be as involved as possible with them and with what they were doing. And I couldn't really see me not wanting to be involved with them and what they were doing in the future. So I just thought, well, there's nothing for me to worry about. I can just go full steam ahead with this. And that's a bit how I sort of do things anyway, and I worry about the consequences later. And anyway, it takes quite a long time to get ordained, even at the quickest of times. So there's plenty of time to figure that out. And I could see that, I was living with lots of Buddhists and order members. So any questions I had could be answered. And there was plenty of information available to me. So I felt quite confident just going forward. I guess one of the things that wasn't so straightforward was when the timing of my life at the time, the way everything sort of landed. I was just sort of starting to go on the retreats where you're learning about what it means to have a life in the order and be ordained, at the around about the same time that I was actually considering having a family. So actually, like, those two processes sort of just unfolded at the same time. And I started going to Padmaloka, and this talk actually sort of seems to have a bit of a theme of Padmaloka. Whatever it is lately, I've got a retreat booked there in May, and I haven't been there for a long time. Padmaloka is a retreat centre, for those that don't know about it. It's set up it's got a couple of different functions, but its main function is to be a centre, a retreat centre where a lot of the training for ordination takes place. And the ordination team, it was a bit complicated to explain, it's not that important, but the place itself, and as a place to go and retreat, I'm pretty confident that anyone that's been there, sort of, it does hold a special place in your heart. There's a lot of just so much good energy going into this place, and it just comes and expresses itself in all these different. I mean, the shrine room on its own is just you know, to go in there and meditate. Anyone who's been there will tell you what, you know, just the effect of walking into that shrine room, for instance. And so I was starting to go along to these retreats at Pamaloka and think and find out what it means to be an order member, to be ordained as a Buddhist, and at the same time I started having a family, so that was a bit of a challenge, sort of balancing it all. But I had a lot of support, and a lot of people gave me their time and energy, and it was fine in the end. And I got ordained about a bit over 5.5 years ago, and my two boys were 3 and 4 at the time, and I went and got ordained with Dharmajit and Arijit in Gukulok with some other people. But if there's anything I could say about that process and going to Padmaloka in particular, well, I just encourage people to go there. You don't have to be wanting to be ordained or be an order member to go to Padmaloka. So just ignoring that for a second, I just encourage you to go there. They have other retreats. And if you really want to, particularly if you want to get some really good instruction on meditation, and some really clear ideas about what it is a Buddhist life really looks like, you'll have my sort of half an hour talk, or you'll have the real thing, my little glimpse into what you know, you get a much bigger picture and a much bigger vision for what a life in the order is from going there. And so if you do decide to do that, I've got a couple of tips for you. So the first one is to and I say you're only supposed to do this really after 8 o'clock. When I invented this, you're only really supposed to do it after 8 o'clock. And I think Mike knows about this. But you go to the tea counter, there's a big tea counter, and you make yourself, well, you get yourself a peppermint tea bag, hot water, peppermint tea, make it as strong as you can, get the hot chocolate, mix the hot chocolate, then the milk, and you've got yourself what I like to call pep chop soy after 8 mint. And it's that's my number one tip for going to Pamaloka. And my second tip for going to Pamaloka is to go to the House of Strength. And the House of Strength is just like a gym sort of thing where people go and they do little workouts, and everyone's doing their own thing in this little House of Strength. But the main reason why I'm promoting going to the House of Strength is that it makes you very much you're coming into the orbit of a particular chap called Surata. And Surata, I like to go to the House of Strength when I'm at Padlock, and it's mainly to cross paths with Surata. And he's this man who's renowned for being incredibly friendly and gentle and kind and funny as anything. So, and it was Surata gave a talk that actually inspired me to do this talk today. Surata gave a talk called "The Life of an Order Member," and I often recommend people to listen to the talk by Surata, "The Life of an Order Member." Partly for the way he delivers it, but partly because I think he makes some good points. So I've sort of ripped off a few of the points that he made from that talk, and I want to sort of pass them on to you if I can, but in a slightly different context, because I mean, he's talking in that talk to people who are training for ordination, who want to get ordained and want to have a life in the order. So I've sort of, I don't know if I've toned it down, I've done something with it, so hopefully it's a bit more relevant. I guess the thing to say right at the start about ordination and a life in the order is you don't get anything really. You really don't get anything at all. In the world we have no, there's no, politicians don't call us and say, what do you think? No one's interested in our opinion in the world particularly. It's a very small movement in terms of the world. well, it's really only just starting out, and it's a new tradition. It's a new order that we're part of, but it only started just before 1970. And actually in the West, it's probably, when I say the West, I mean countries like England, Scotland, America, that all of those countries put together only really make up about half the order. That the order is, half of the order is in India, where which is a bit of a long story, but that's quite a significant point, that our order is actually global, and a whole half of the order members that are alive today, they're in India. They're the Indian order members. And yeah, it doesn't matter if you're in India, America, Australia, wherever. We really don't get anything. You're doing this because of really one thing. Well, you could boil it down really to one thing, and that is you've come across, you've made contact with something that you've come across something that has, first of all, probably changed you, or changed you in some way, or you've recognized as having the potential to change you in a way that you would like to be changed. And I would say pretty much across the board, people that I know that have taken up a life in the order, they would feel a very strong link to the Buddha. And the Buddha, as in the life of the Buddha, 2,500 years or so ago in India, well-known story, you'd feel a very strong link and a strong connection with the Buddha. And also to what the Buddha is, and I guess it's worth saying what the Buddha is. The Buddha is a human being, enlightened human being. He's attained Bodhi. He's attained Buddhahood. So he is a human being that has now gone outside of what it means to be a human being. At least, I suppose you could say his mind is not a normal human mind. And I think a life in the order is deeply connected with that whole principle, the principle of Bodhi. So what I've kind of done is I've got these points that Surita made in this talk, and I've had a little bit of a think about those. And I've also got aspects of Bodhi that I wanted to group them under. And those aspects are wisdom and freedom and happiness. Okay. So you've sort of got a kind of cognitive, mental aspect of Bodhi, of Buddhahood. You've got a sort of more volitional or sort of trajectory in freedom. And in happiness, you've got a sort of more emotional aspect of Bodhi. So I'll start with wisdom anyway, and how that might connect to the life of an order member. And I think primarily what you can expect from me or another order member, what you hope to expect from an order member. And just bear in mind, these are my views. This is not written down somewhere. This is my views of being an order member and going to Padmaloka for retreats and training to be an order member. And but it comes with my package, if you see what I mean, and my eyes and my experience. So just bear that in mind. But what I think, and this is again, I think you can expect from my point of view, is that with an order member, you would have, with a person who's taken up a life in the order, you would have somebody that has a fairly effective understanding of what we call in Buddhism conditionality, which really I think you can boil down to, rather than take up conditionality as the sort of word that needs to be explained, just think of it in terms of conditions. And with an order member, you would expect an order member or to be fairly confident in navigating conditions, conditionality. And that sort of basically means they have this vision for wisdom, they have this vision for what they want their life to be like as a Buddha. And they will then navigate conditionality, which is in themselves, all the things that make them how they are, who they are, where they've come from, their particularities. They'll be able to navigate that. They'll be, first of all, they have a really good awareness of what sorts of conditions play out in them. And that's not just, that's just not their psychology either, by the way. That's, that's dealing with everything that gets thrown up by the body, by the mind, and by our sort of past history. And who knows how far that goes back. But I think, and this is what I tend to see, is people in the order have a good understanding of what types of things you need to avoid, situations and people that you might need to avoid if you really want to live a wise life. You would know, even including your own family, so that interpersonal aspect of conditionality, the types of interpersonal situations which are either going to bring out the best in you or they're going to bring out the worst in you. They're going to make you wiser, make you more aware, or they're going to make you revert to type back into just the sort of more habitual, immature, irrational sort of response, not one with awareness and sort of a level of wisdom. So, I'd like to think they avoid politics, but I know the reality. But what I mean by politics, I don't mean sort of political leaders in the way, how a country is run particularly. I mean being political and being sort of in that sort of powery kind of mode. But that kind of situation, you don't need to be in politics to get into political sort of polarized situations. They will not lead you, they will not lead you down through conditionality out the other side into something else altogether, through awareness of the way conditions work into wisdom. And even things like sports and hobbies and the type of habits that an order member will know what types of habits don't help and what ones will help. Of course, I think, well, it's across the board. A life in the order involves meditation. So order members meditate, and but they meditate in a very particular way as well. I think meditation in the sort of popular sense is so easily corrupted, isn't it? It's so easy, something like a bliss out session or something, or about your personal experience, like I go to meditate and I go to do that like I might do I don't know, even anything pleasurable. You do it like it's something pleasurable, like it's something fun. And it would not be about that. It's not that you're not going to enjoy it and it's not going to be pleasurable. Actually, it's the opposite. You want to look for pleasure, but you want to do meditation or within a system of practice. So we learn a whole system of practice in our training for ordination, and our life in the order is to use that whole system to help us with the different aspects of our mind, to help us for that lack of integration, that help us with those bits of ourselves that make us negative and unhappy. We need to sort of take up myths in meditation so that we're sort of our meditation is part of not just our immediate experience and making that better, but part of a whole life of meditation. Because remember, this is a life in the order we've committed to, a whole life. So that meditation needs to be meditated. You need to meditate in the context of your whole life. So of course that means meditation sometimes is really good, and you get in touch with something and it works really well, and you want to do it. And other times you don't want to do it, and it's a grind, and you're losing your way. But whatever way it's going, whether it's going up or it's going down or out altogether. A life in the order is about bringing it back into the system of practice and finding the edge of what you need to do. And so in sort of simple terms, it means not just doing the mindfulness of breathing and trying to just calm down. It means doing the metta bhavana and bringing that third person in and seeing how you really feel and seeing what your real response is, and then trying to find a point of freedom in that response. Can't really talk about a life of meditation without talking about being on retreats, because daily practice, anyone who who's been on retreat knows what I mean by the effect of a retreat. It has this lasting, lingering effect. But also too, that there's this sort of immediate, lasting, lingering effect that sort of wears off and you forget about. But actually, over years and years of going on retreat consistently, it's amazing what threads you pick up, and amazing how you can forget about a thread and then pick it back up again when you're on retreat. So a life of meditation and a life in the order really involves being on retreat, and that's a key condition. And this is what I'm putting this under the heading of wisdom, because a life in the order is wise enough to know that I need to go on retreat. I will not be able to keep up an effective meditation on my own. It won't happen. I need to go on retreat. I need to be with others meditating. And I need those kind of conditions where everything quietens down and the phone goes off and there's not something to do straight after the meditation. And then I think the other thing just to mention in terms of understanding conditions that are really supportive of a life in the order, I think it comes down to sort of something along the lines of getting together and involvement with other people. Definitely a life in the order is a very, very shared sort of life, but I'll come on to that a bit later, actually, how a life in the order, it's not, it's part of a collective where trying to find the right words, but maybe it'll come up later when I go on to explain about friendship. But certainly in terms of the wisdom aspect of your life in the order, you need to, you know that it's good for you to be around other order members and be around Buddhists and put yourself in situations where you're involved and you're being asked to sort of stretch yourself and be a bit more than you might have been, and that you wouldn't do that on your own. You need to do that with others. And so that's a very key piece of understanding about the way conditions work that most order members would have a really effective understanding of. So just coming on to that second aspect of Bodhi, this second sort of kind of like theme of enlightenment is this theme of freedom. And I think when you think of if you've ever heard the life of the Buddha, the story of the life of the Buddha, and when he gains enlightenment, he faces these demons and he faces these cravings and he faces doubt and he faces all these things in a very imaginative sort of way. But what he ultimately does is just gets himself free of all that. Like, we know how deep that runs in us, how deep fear, when this war kicked off in the Ukraine, my immediate response was just fear. It was just hatred, like, what are people doing? And it took me, like, I got to put my hands up, it took me about a week, maybe 2 weeks, to turn off Radio 4 and just go, hang on a second, do I want to be in this? Do I want to be caught up in this sort of hatred? And I was going along fine. I didn't think that was going to happen. I didn't have anything wrong in my life at the time. And yes, there's always that threat that war can break out and all the rest of it. But But it's interesting, isn't it, how quick that something like hatred can, how deep it is in us, and then how quickly it can be sparked off. And the life of the Buddha and the story of his enlightenment is a story of the extinguishing of that kind of hatred. And I don't think any kind of story about the Buddha or image of the Buddha can really bring it home like your own hatred flaring up. When that flares up, and then you sort of bring the Buddha to mind, and you can see, oh, there's so far to go. But it's the same with craving. It's the same with just a sort of, our perspective is never quite big enough. And the Buddha managed to sort of untangle himself and get completely free of that. And that's what, as a life in the order, we're trying to be in touch with as where we can. We're trying to find ways to untangle ourselves and be free. And just speaking personally, that what I've written down here is that commitment leads to freedom, which is a bit, I don't know exactly why I wrote that, but I certainly, because when I remember getting ordained, particularly after the private ordination, that happens in two parts. There's a private ordination that happens just you and your private preceptor, and then a few days go by, and then the public ordination happens, which involves everybody else, and everybody finds out your name, and it's a whole ceremony. And I think it was in that period between the private and the public ordination that I sort of remember having this memory, at least it was late at night, I remember it being dark, just sort of thinking that my relationship to the whole cosmos has sort of changed. It's like I'm not doing something sort of magical or different. I felt more like, oh, I'm doing something that people have always done. People have created a sort of scenario where other people can lay down their whole life and say, right, I want to live this sort of like religious kind of life. I want to be, and this goes back, I'm not even talking about just Buddhism, I'm talking about all religions. Human beings seem to create these kind of worlds where other people or themselves can sort of lay down their whole life and say, I just want to do this forever. And I just remember sort of feeling like that was sort of somehow linked to all of those people across humanity, across time, and feeling like, oh, I've laid down my life like that. I didn't quite realise it at the time, but it sort of hit me afterwards, like, right, so I've now sort of taken up this new relationship with the world. And then strangely, that felt sort of free in a way, like it felt free. I felt like there's certain things I could no longer really entertain or get involved in. And rather than that being a sort of limitation on my life, that felt like a point of freedom. It's like, well, I don't need to worry about that anymore. I don't need to. The question of whether to go to the pub and drink 6 pints is not in my mind anymore. It's like it's not an option now. And that was knocked out of me along the way. But I think there's a big shift. I felt, at least after my ordination, I felt a huge shift with the sort of, maybe it's my consciousness, but it felt like it was related to everybody else. It felt like I needed to honour everybody else that had tried to live that kind of life, right back through humanity. Anyway, I remember it felt like a point of freedom. I think the other thing too about being ordained and being a life in the order is, because you don't get anything, you get, people give you a name, but even that, you don't have to use your order name. Lots of people don't change their name legally, for instance. And anyway, your name has always been free to change. I remember when I was young, I didn't really like my first name, and my dad said, well, do you want to just use your middle name? And I remember thinking, really? Like, you can just do that? So you get given a name, but that's, you don't, you do it because you really want to do it. And I think a huge part I think probably the biggest part in the build-up to getting ordained is figuring out enough in yourself how much you actually want to do this for the right reasons. And also to sort of communicating that with other people and just figuring out, so if, for instance, if somebody came to me and said they wanted to be ordained. One of the things I'm trying to figure out is, well, you're completely free not to do this. You do not have to do this. You will not get anything. You won't go up or down in my estimation as a person or anything like that. And it's so much easier to say that now on this side of ordination, but honestly, people don't go up or down in my estimation just because they're ordained particularly. People go up and down in my estimation all the time just based on what they do and what they say and how they behave, you know. And I mean, I live a life that's fully engaged with the world. I'm a full-time nurse, you know, and you know, don't go out there to work and then come flying home to the order and say, oh, help me, you know, give me inspiration, let me go back out there. I'm inspired every day by people that I meet. You know, I work with people who are dying. You can't believe the stuff they come out with, you know. So anyway, what's the point here? The point is, if you're thinking about a life in the order, you don't really get anything. It's a stepping into something that's really quite personal to you, and that you should do with complete freedom. It's not something. And if you meet anybody in the order, I'm sure they'll say the same, is that you need to want to do it. It's not something that you're not going to get anything for it particularly. So anyway, there's a couple of aspects of freedom that are trying to be drawn out through this life in the order. So we've had sort of aspects of wisdom, we've had aspects of freedom, and the last one I want to come on to is an aspect of happiness. And again, I've got a bit of a disclaimer here. I don't want people to think, oh, life is happy in the order, because it's not happy in the order. You know, getting ordained doesn't make you happy. But certainly the life in the order can be very fulfilling when it's engaged with, you know, if you think about it, you know, if you're meditating regularly and all the things that I've mentioned before, they do actually sort of start to generate a bit of happiness and peace but you know, the order is people. It's not that nothing's sort of changed in our humanity at all. And so, you know, if you live with order members or you've worked with order members, you'll know that they're very much people. They're still unintegrated, they're still forgetful, they're still slightly devious at times and don't recognize their own motivations and will try and do you in, you know, and then hopefully say sorry later when they realize what they've done. But you know, we're still people, you know, we're still very much people, and we come with all those conditionings of people and the way people behave. But within that, I suppose, what we're trying to do, and I think particularly the communal aspect and the meditation, what we're trying to really do is to borrow Surita's phrase, is to drive the views of Buddhism, to drive the teachings of Buddhism and the sort of the laws of Buddhism. We're trying to drive them into our guts. We're trying to, he says, you can drive it into your bowels. And Surita talks about how you know there's like a brain in your guts. I don't know how it is, but there's a book about it, isn't there? There's like a brain in your guts. Like, I don't know how it works, but anyway. But anyway, to have a gut feeling is a pretty strong feeling. So I'm just trying to illustrate. You're trying to get Buddhism below your head and down into your body. And there is a real happiness to that when you can sort of really feel it. And you might have thoughts spinning off and you might have emotions flying off this direction, but hopefully over time, as a life in the order, something's been taken on into your body and can be felt. And, you know, you just never know when you're going to feel that. It might be when you're dying. It might be when somebody else is dying. It might be when a child's born. You never know, but it's usually something meaningful and something important. And if you can drive all of that meditation and inspiration from the life of the Buddha into your body, then hopefully it will serve you when you need it most. And then there's a whole aspect of just being involved in the projects and I mean, I think of the London Buddhist Centre when I came along there, and you sort of just serve it. There's something about it that makes you want to offer yourself up. And I just have this sort of like running joke with myself that probably when I came along, I thought of myself as being out front and being really inspiring. But probably my best role at the LBC is like, going up to see my friends and just driving them somewhere, or ironing their shirt or something, just trying to do something like that. And I would just never have expected that, but it's truly sort of, and then I feel like, oh, well, I'm doing what I'm serving here, I'm serving something that's sort of beyond me. So yeah, I massively encourage people to get involved in those kind of institutions of the movement and things like the London Buddhist Centre and any other project, and live that life, because it will have an effect. It might not be a necessarily pleasant feeling, and you might bump into loads of people and take chunks out of each other, and it might go sour and all the rest of it. But I don't know, my belief is, my faith is that despite your experience of that, despite your experience of serving and spreading the Dharma, something goes into your being, something goes into your bowels, into your guts, and it will help later on. That's my faith anyway, and I have seen it in my own life. So yeah, and you do that very freely. You do that very freely, and that's another real happiness of the life in the order, is that none of what we do for the order is for money. Like, nothing is for money. We take it super seriously, like this group, the three of us and Sam, take it super seriously. Way more seriously than I do things that I get paid for, and that is the right way around. That's definitely the right way around. There's nothing that we're doing that anyone should be charged for. It's something that you give freely. It was given to you. What I've received was given to me very, very freely, and I've taken it freely, and I've taken it up freely, and it needs to. There's a lot of happiness in that free association between people. And then I'm going to finish with a story, and this takes me back to Padmaloka, because I was at Padmaloka on a retreat, and I was with my preceptor, Maitreya Bandhu, and I had this memory of the film Saving Private Ryan. And has everybody seen that film, Saving Private Ryan? Has anyone not seen it? Private Ryan, the film starts with the end of his life, doesn't it? And he's walking along the beach in Normandy, and he comes to the grave of the captain, and he looks down at the grave, and he starts weeping, and his wife comes over to him, and she comes over and like holds him and he's looking at the grave of the captain, and the captain was the captain of the squad, or whatever they call the squadron, or the platoon, or whatever they are, that went on a mission to find him and save him, because all his brothers had been killed, and they wanted to save this one guy so that at least he could go home to his mum and she wouldn't have 4 or 5 sons dead. So it starts off on this moral quest, and it's all about Private Ryan, because he's being saved for his mum so that the whole family doesn't get wiped out by this war. And virtually, throughout the film, all the guys in the squad that have come to save him have been picked off and killed under one circumstance or another. And then right at the end, of course, the guy who keeps their morale up and keeps them going to save this Private Ryan in the middle of all this madness, he gets shot and killed. And his last words to Private Ryan were, "Earn it, earn this." And so and then he dies, and then so Private Ryan's been saved from war, the only man to be saved from war, the only individual special enough, and it's not some he's not special because he's done something amazing. He's special because he's alive, and all the other life around him has been taken in his family. But the captain still says it's not good enough for you just to be alive for your mum. You've got to earn this with the rest of your life. Yeah. So when he sees the grave, he turns to his wife. He doesn't look at the grave to know whether he's earned it. He turns to his wife and he says to his wife, tell me I've had a good life. Tell me, I can't remember exactly what he says. Tell me what I've done to, have I, basically saying he wants to know if he's earned it, right? The only one that could know that whether he's earned it or not is the person that's been with him the whole time. He can't get the captain's approval for whether he's lived a good life. It has to be the person that has been with him thick and thin all the time. And this is this point I wanted to make about friendship. I had this memory come to me when I was looking at my tribando in the lounge at Pamaloka, thinking, I'm trying to do this thing. I'm trying to live this life in the order. I'm trying to do the best I possibly can. It won't mean anything to me. I will not know if I've done it well. I will not know if I've lived a good life in the order unless I can turn to Aryajit or Dharmajit or somebody like that who's known me the whole way, and I can turn to them and say, tell me I've done a good job of this. Tell me I haven't completely, tell me I've lived this life in the order. And that's the only way I'll really know. And that's why friendship is the emotional equivalent to any wisdom teaching that you're going to find in Buddhism. That's why the quality of your friendships and the lasting depth of your friendship equals whatever you've learned, whatever you think you're wise about. It will be reflected in your friends. Thanks.